Congratulations on the recertification of business.
Yes, thank you. That was nice.
Okay.
It's not as bad getting recertified as the first.
All right, we're going to go ahead and start tonight's council conference. We have one item on the agenda, and it is information on our backflow prevention program. And we have Jerry Wellborn, the manager of the water treatment plant and director of utilities, Ken Comiskey. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And again, we're here to talk to you about backflow prevention and protecting the public water supply. And I'm going to explain to you tonight what backflow is and why a program is necessary, how backflow happens, and what the components of a cross-connection control program are. So what is backflow, right? So backflow is the unwanted flow of water in the reverse direction. And it comes in two forms, either back pressure or back siphonage. And back pressure is literally when the pressure in the building is higher than the line pressure and water flows into the line, out of the business's plumbing, into the distribution system. And so you get the backwash of some business. Back siphonage
Because we're all eating.
is a negative, pressure in your distribution system, right? And so that negative pressure literally pulls the water out of the business into the distribution system. And that is back siphonage. And these things happen. So how do they happen? These are a few of the ways you can have a backflow incident. Main breaks, customers who have processes that are pressurized vessels, city staff flushing water mains, emergency firefighting, and pump failures. Some of these are planned. Obviously, if the city's out there flushing mains, we can plan that. If we're educated on backflow, we can understand what line pressure is and what business pressure is and manage this in a way that we don't cause backflow incidents. But if there's a fire or there's a line break, all bets are off. I mean, it's an unplanned event, and all you can think about is putting out the fire or stopping the flow of water. And backflow incidents can happen. If you have a program and you've been out there in advance and you've educated your community and you've educated your businesses and they have these assemblies and devices in place to prevent backflow, you're prepared for those moments. And that's what we would like to do, is get ourselves prepared for those moments. And so I'm going to show you this, which is a moment in Corpus Christi, Texas, where they had a backflow incident in 2016. And I'm hoping it works. There you go.
So this is where we're told the water may have been contaminated. This is the industrial district right here in Corpus Christi, and we're standing outside the Aragon Asphalt and Emulsions company. They make asphalt, which is basically the stuff that we put on our roads. Now they lease this space from an oil company. It's called Valero. Now if we could just pan over to show you the sign there, Valero. Yeah, they're an oil company, and as far as the relationship between both of these companies is concerned, all we know is that Valero leases part of its land to the asphalt company, and they have what they describe as a strategic partnership. For right now, that's pretty much all that we know as far as their relationship is concerned. Now, this is in the industrial district. That's what they call it here in Corpus Christi, so it is far away from the residential area. But the question is, how is it that a chemical that they might have dumped into the water supply within the industrial district, how did that possibly get into our water? That's a question that we're still waiting to find out. We asked the city if Aragon had a backflow preventer on site since it deals with hazardous chemicals. Now, the city, however, says that it does not, but the city of Corpus Christi also says that Aragon and Valero both told them that they did have a backflow preventer on site. That backflow preventer is supposed to stop hazardous chemicals from making their way back into the water and thus contaminating it. Now, one of our reporters was here on the site yesterday and actually witnessed them trying to install a backflow preventer here at the site of Aragon Asphalt and Emulsions. Now, this whole thing, the ban was called because apparently this company had dumped a chemical, a pretty nasty, corrosive chemical called indolin. You can Google it if you want, and you'll see that it's a pretty nasty chemical. It causes it causes burning to your skin and your eyes. It also causes some digestive issues if you ingest it, even if we are allowed to, if the entire city, if the ban is lifted for the entire city, we still have a lot of questions about water safety and how something like this could have happened in the first place. Of course, we're going to be here to cover this issue and let you know what else we uncover over the next few days.
So that happened December 1st of 2016, and they didn't get it resolved until December 16th. So there's your Christmas, right? And I have to say, while, you know, Indolin is a chemical that you can't say you can just not drink your water. I mean, you literally were told you can't use your water to shower in or anything. I mean, so this went on for days, and this is a big town. So it was a pretty embarrassing moment for them, and it would be awful for that moment to come here. I mean, for all of us to be sitting here watching 2 minutes of us on TV would be pretty awkward. And backflow incidents happen. And these are all real live documented incidents. Car washes, paint factories, gas storage. Keep in mind, a lot of these, if you're a car wash and you've contaminated the city of Norman's distribution system, you don't have deep pockets, and you probably can't afford to pay for whatever it costs to clean that up. So the city ends up, the utility ends up bearing the cost of that. Since I've worked in Norman, I know of 2 incidents here in town that have happened. One was a private water well hooked to a soda dispensing machine in a fast food business, and they were making slushies. And they had no idea that they had taken an unknown water supply. It didn't even occur to them. And were making food and selling it. And we came in as the water department and pulled their meter and required them to make some changes and documented that and put them back in business. The other one was a restaurant in town, a little diner. They called because the water tasted funny, and we got over there and realized the water tasted like lemonade. And it was, again, their soda dispensing machine, and the backflow assembly associated with it had failed. And so the lemonade was leaking into the business distribution system. And they had no idea what was going on. They were simply looking to the water department and saying, you got a problem. And we were looking back at them saying, it's on your side of the meter. You have to call your soda dispensing company and ask them to help you figure out what to do next. So they happen. And in Norman, businesses and homes have private wells. And as a water department that's trying to develop a program, what we would like to do is get out there in the community and identify those non-potable sources that can potentially be hooked to our system. Know where they are, know what people are doing with them, educate them on how to prevent them from causing cross connections and backflow incidents, and documented the tracking of all of that stuff. As we said, components of a backflow program are education, tracking, and customer service. And what we would like to do is get out there in the community and meet people, understand how they use water, and educate them on what they can do and what is their responsibility to protect the water system. Education, like I said, is a huge component, and many cities have backflow programs. They'll post websites and they'll send out literature in the mail to educate people on how to prevent backflow. Planning departments require these assemblies and devices and air gaps to be installed, and they do a great job. What we need to do as a utility is get in the business of following up and communicating with people and tracking those things and educating our community. There are regulations out there. The DEQ requires water systems to protect the water system, requires purveyors to protect the water system from backflow. And the city ordinance right here says that we've adopted the International Plumbing Code, and that requires the testing of each assembly annually. Problem is that we are not enforcing it. Most cities in Oklahoma are not enforcing it. It's just, at this point, something that we have to start trying to get to. Department of Environmental Quality says you're not allowed to have a physical connection between an unknown water source. You're not allowed to have a physical net connection between a private water well. And all of this stuff is telling you if you want to connect these things, you have to have a backflow assembly, a backflow device, some sort of air gap, something that protects the community from the source. The International Plumbing Code, which Norman adopts, spells out that a backflow assembly is required to be tested once a year. So we have rules and regulations in place that tell us what we need to be doing. What we need to do is create a program to actually execute that well and document it well and educate our community. Additions we could make to our existing ordinances would require people to participate, would require people to have someone who's licensed and trained to come into their business, survey how they use water, and tell them whether or not they have issues and what they can do to resolve them. This is a part of our ordinance that we would suggest. And what it basically says is, if you have a backflow assembly, you have to test it once a year. You have to test it after it's been repaired. If your building has been vacant for a year, you have to test it to show that it's going to work. And if you ever move it for whatever reason, you have to test it again. Now, we talked a lot about assemblies, and I need to make you understand that testable assemblies are one way that we protect from backflow. And they're typically put on high or medium hazard situations. And these are backflow assemblies. There are also things like air gaps that require no testing. You can put those on a high or medium hazard site. And because of that air gap, as long as you're educated and understand that you don't want to defeat that, you don't want to put a piece of tubing on that pipe and run it down into that barrel so you don't splash anything. You have to know that you have to leave it alone. It has to be maintained as it is.
Councilmember Patron?
Okay, if I heard you correctly, it was that we're wanting everybody who is, all businesses that might be potentially putting, that this would be relevant to, but also homes, if they're on a water well?
If they have their own water well and they're connected to our system, we want to make sure there's some backflow preventer or those two systems are physically disconnected.
So for the homes that, say, have a water well for their lawn only, but they're on city water, this is going to apply to them?
Yeah, and it should now. I mean.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure I'm correct. And
Yeah.
then, by any chance, because I'm sure we're going to get some of these questions, can you tell me, well, just to make sure I understand, if you're on water well only, it doesn't apply to you?
That's correct.
Okay. And how much is an inspection for one of these?
Typically, when I have someone come to one of the city facilities to do a backflow test, it's $100.
Okay.
And if you have to have some repair work done, then that's a separate
Right.
issue.
But that's,
Now, like we said, you can physically, a lot of people who have those water wells at their homes, they aren't tied to their homes. And so truly for them, it's a matter of coming in, verifying that they're not attached to the city's infrastructure and leaving that alone. Because then they don't have to participate. As
Right.
long as they don't make a change, they don't have to participate any farther than that. Mm-hmm.
thank you.
These these vacuum breakers here are non-testable devices, and a lot of people have those in their homes. They're on the outside of your house where you hook your water hose up. We have them in our laboratory at the water treatment plant, so you can run the water and you don't have to worry about back siphonage. So there are lots of ways to protect from backflow. They don't all require a testable assembly, and it depends on your application. Now, our program is young, but we have done a few things to try and get ourselves off the ground. We've discussed with council. This is our second time to come to you guys and explain to you what we're doing and how we're moving our way forward. We held a meeting with plumbers. We had some plumbers show up. And for them, the answer is, if there's business, we can do it. They aren't waiting for anything other than someone to call them up and ask them to do a backflow test or do a backflow repair. There are people in the community who can do that.
Councilmember Scanlon?
You mentioned inspections, and brings to mind, who does the inspecting? City and/or licensed plumbers who report the results to the city?
Yeah, and we would see that as being third parties. You would hire someone who's
But I guess
trained
that's what I'm
and
driving
registered
at.
with the city as a
Because I don't think we have
surveyor.
the resources certainly to do that.
Right, and we weren't looking to hire staff to just be testers and surveyors, exactly. Our goals going forward, we'd like to meet with some businesses, Chamber of Commerce, Lions Club, Rotary Club, some of those, start educating our community, make people understand what we're talking about, how it affects them, what they can do going forward to participate. And we'd like to get an ordinance in place so that we have something with some teeth that allows us to get out there and communicate with people and do the work that needs to be done. And we need to identify our stakeholders, those people in Norman who are high or medium hazards. Those are really and truly for us the first folks that we would like to connect with, because they have backflow assemblies and processes that we would like to know about, and we would like to understand how they're using water. In general, backflow prevention is about protecting public health and protecting our infrastructure. And if you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. City Manager Pyle.
Is there a software program that we would utilize to kind of keep inventory of who has a backflow and when they last got tested, et cetera?
Yes, and our new utilities software that we're purchasing has a backflow prevention tracking component associated with it.
That's through Tyler Technologies?
That's one of the reasons we're kind of slow in rolling this out, because we did talk to the council.
Sorry.
Some of you were here, some of you were not here.
I remember having this conversation.
And so,
I'm glad you remember that.
that's a good piece
All I
of the
remember was
puzzle.
that we
Rather
had
than
it.
buy something, we were waiting till this rolls out with our customer service thing, so it will be integral to what our customer service stuff.
Excellent, thank you.
Councilmember Bierman.
So I think I heard you say that you were going to be reaching out to businesses, which I do believe you should do. But I think it would also be important to reach out to neighborhood organizations, maybe some of the larger HOAs, because if this is something that we're going to be requiring homeowners to do at some point, it sounds like we're going to be primarily focusing on the high and mid risk businesses. But if this is something that eventually we're going to be requiring of homeowners, I think we need to have a really good sense of what it's going to cost to install, because I'm more worried about the smaller homes in kind of the older, more established neighborhoods that are going to be much more sensitive to them, what is to them an unanticipated cost like this. And so I'd like us to be really judicious about how we roll this out to homeowners and put that definitely far lower on the priority list. Because I know of a number of neighborhoods in my ward that this is going to be, it's going to be concerning to them if they don't have all the information right up front. And it's going to be concerning to them because a lot of them are on fixed incomes or have to budget really strictly throughout the month. And so having as much lead up time as possible for this, for them in particular, I think would be really helpful.
I think it's a really good point. Yeah, and we would like very much to use utility bills and our website and other methods of educating the community before we impact any residents, for sure.
But realistically, it'll be years before we get to that point.
Yes.
'Cause
Then we
wanna-
should make that clear. I just don't want to unnecessarily concern people too
No,
early when we
that-
start talking
no,
about
we
this.
want to make
so.
sure, we get the hospitals, the mortuaries, the dentist's office, the car washes,
Yep.
things that are pressurizing their system. We don't want them pushing stuff back into our system.
Absolutely.
If everybody gets a irrigation system, they should come with that vacuum breaker, and that should be good enough. We'll worry about that later.
Okay. Thanks.
Councilmember Hall.
So 2 questions on the software issue. So when are you expecting to have that available to you?
That's a good question.
It is supposed to be in it's supposed to be this year, 2020,
Yeah, they're
this calendar year.
They're
Okay.
going through the training right now. We're doing the training on the accounting piece of it, and the customer service is the next piece of the puzzle. So they're going through the training on that part too. But it'll probably be more towards the end of the summer, probably, before they get that up and running.
So rolling this program out is really tied to the software timeline?
It would just make it, as city manager said, it would make it easier for us to track,
Yeah.
because it's just a tickler file that they say, here's your customer, and he has a car wash, and it's been 1 year since he's been tested. You need to send him a letter and tell him they got tested, stuff like that would be all on their customer file.
So my other question is, on the stakeholder category and the high and medium risk, are those businesses already identified? I mean, does that happen somehow in the planning process, or is it something you all pick up, or how does that work? How do you know who they are?
The planning department does a really good job now.
Okay.
If you're building a business or an industry or something like that, they look at the plumbing code and they say, you're required to have a backflow preventer. And
Okay, so that's where it starts.
And they're
Okay.
good at that.
Okay.
The piece that we fall apart at in the whole state is you're really supposed to test these annually.
Yeah.
Once you put them in, doesn't mean they last forever. And no one really, the DEQ and Tulsa and Oklahoma City is looking at us right now thinking, everybody's like, who goes first?
Everyone's thinking Norman's gonna do something, and they'll all watch and see what we do and figure
How well
out
it
how they're
goes.
gonna go, how they're gonna roll theirs out next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because it seems like we've had so many discussions on different topics about the first steps that we seem to be managing pretty effectively, but the inspection piece following the first steps that we're doing pretty effectively is kind of missing. So I really am very interested in what you're proposing, and it seems like an important piece to implement.
Well, and you'll find that some of these businesses in town that are national or international businesses, they're testing their backflow assemblies now. They're doing this work already because they're in states where it's required, and the programs are pretty stringent. And so for them, it's easier to apply one standard to all of their facilities rather than say, oh, in Oklahoma, we don't have to do any of that, but in Tennessee, we have to do that.
So do we know who those people are?
I get backflow assembly tests from Lowe's or
Okay.
Home Depot or Embassy Suites, you know, on occasion, right? They'll call me.
They're saying, who do we
Torchy's
send our
Taco.
results to? And we're like, yeah, I guess us.
Right. Exactly. And they're all a piece of paper because, you know, we don't have an electronic system. And for us, getting an ordinance in place, getting an electronic, system to download and upload that data, and creating a system where it can all be electronic. I don't have to mail paper letters. I can email stuff is really valuable.
So, one more follow-up. So, what we need now, because I wasn't here for the first round, so this is my first exposure. So we do have ordinances in place that just need to be amended or added to. I mean, we already have some of the structure that we need, or are we talking about new?
We have the International Plumbing Code in place.
Okay.
And we've had it for a long time, and it requires you to test an assembly annually.
Okay.
The reality is no one in the state is applying that. And so for us to walk up to the people and say, well, so now we're gonna start doing this, is an awkward moment. And it really doesn't have a lot of support for a system to, try to get businesses to participate. So we would really like an ordinance that is designed to get people to participate.
Okay. Thank you.
You won't get the complaints from the Lowe's or the Embassy
No.
Suites because they just do it because the corporate says they have to do it. You get complaints from the mom and pop places that like, why I've never done this before? Why I have to do this now? That's the stuff.
And one of the, as we said, one of the components of a program is customer service. And I come from the laboratory where customer service was a big part of what I felt was important. And so I feel like customer service is an important part of this program too. The mom and pop people, there's an opportunity for someone to go to them and see how they use water and help them to understand if you do this, you don't need that testable assembly. Or you're just going to have it. There's just no way around it. People who you can go to, and they aren't paying $50. They're just getting your personal information, and then they're going to have to figure out if they want to hire somebody. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I actually did have one. How much, I forgot to ask, how much is the actual apparatus like first time around?
Depends
They
on
can get
how
very
big.
expensive.
Yeah.
So for a residence?
Oh, a residence, you wouldn't need one unless you talk about your irrigation system.
Right.
Your irrigation system is about $125 or something like that for an air gap on your irrigation system. I'm looking at Bob Christian back there.
Oh, I was like, who is that?
Yeah, he would know.
It ranges depending on the type of device you use, but that's a good start.
And that's a non-testable. That just it prevents the water from going in the direction. The water is
that.
pressurized and it pushes a spring up and that lets your irrigation system go. And when your irrigation system stops, there's no pressure on this end, then the spring drops it back and that's it. So it turns off your water.
Okay, so that they could do it, we're thinking about $125 for the first install?
If you buy an in-ground irrigation system, it comes with it.
You better have one, really. I mean,
Bob won't let you put one in if you don't.
It's interesting because the homes that I know of in Ward 3, it's the much older homes that have, it's like they went to city water later. And so they just use the well water for their lawn.
and that's okay if they have like that one restaurant he had well water. He's been an old restaurant and they were there forever. And so he just hooked it up to the next thing he wanted to, which happened to be their soda machine. And wasn't working right. That's how it didn't pass back T-test or
Oh,
something.
the health department came in, yes.
And so,
That's what
you know, we
happened.
said, no, just disconnect it, man. Don't,
Yeah.
you know, physically, I want to see a gap between this is your irrigation or your well water or whatever it is, and don't attach it to your plumbing inside your building. That's all it was. There was nothing to test anymore. Just cut the piece of pipe out, turn this off, and turn this one on.
I think what I'm trying to say is I just want to be able to tell them how much ballpark figure it would cost for them to go, because they don't want to use city water for their lawn if they have a perfectly working well.
And they don't have to. I guess what I'm saying is if it's physically disconnected, their house
so they
water
just-
system is not connected to their irrigation system, then they don't have to do anything.
Okay,
Exactly.
so 0.
Maybe, yeah.
Yes, and so the only thing we would want is just to know that they're there and that they have a private well. So on
Yeah.
occasion, we would send them a letter and say, just checking, have you changed anything? And they would hopefully say no. Or if they said yes, we would say, well, we want to come by and do a survey.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Councilman Bierman.
That was going to be my point of clarification because I think for some reason I missed that. So if you are a home that is on city water and you have no irrigation system, you're just a normal Norm and I going about their business, this doesn't affect you at all.
That's correct.
That's exactly right.
If you have an irrigation system that is connected to a well that is totally separate from city's water, this doesn't affect you at all.
That's correct.
That's
Okay. So only if you, as a resident, if you have a home that is on city water and your irrigation system is also on city water, and maybe Bob was sick that day, or it was before he started to require them, and it wasn't a recent one that comes with it, this could affect you.
Yeah.
But the range of cost for the solution, though it could technically vary a lot, it is likely to be for residents on the lower end. For businesses, aside from the high hazard and maybe even the mid hazard, if you're, a local gas station with a pressurized soda machine, the solution is probably not going to be crazy expensive.
Right.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I was clear. Thank you.
Like Bob's group does a good job. Fire suppression systems have to have a backflow preventer. And those are expensive because you're talking about big pipes.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Any other questions?
And all of those are to be tested. Fire suppression systems should be tested annually. Backflow prevention assembly should be tested annually. Mm-hmm.
All right.
So we have draft ordinance language we're already working on
Yes.
for
Yes.
consideration. And I guess timing is just everything depending on when we think we go live, and Tim was in and out. But we'll try to time it so the ordinance isn't in effect and we're not living up to our own ordinance. So we want the timing of those to kind of line up fairly close together.
And the city of Norman and facilities maintenance, Brenda's group, and the water treatment division have done a really good job of hitting city buildings and making sure we meet the code that's coming. And we continue to work on that going forward.
Definitely meet our own requirements
First.
before we ask anyone else to, so I appreciate that.
But Jerry and Brenda's group did almost a year survey of every building in the city and making sure that before we tell you how to do something that we did it right. So they did a really good job.
Excellent.
And it was important for all of us to learn something. I mean, we've all learned a lot. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for the update. Keep us posted. All right, y'all. 30 minutes.